Great. Hello, and welcome to our Impactful Projects and Planning Micro Training Series. I'm Jamie Asdani. For today's session, we've got Susan Kahan of Sapphire Fundraising Specialist here to talk about fundraising, planning, and projects. So welcome, Susan. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jamie. It's so great to be with you today.
Thanks. So tell us a little bit about your work, about your company. What impact are you hoping to create for your clients?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm a big fan of what you do. Know you're excellent at what you do. So it's great to get to talk to you about planning and projects, and especially as it relates to fundraising. And so, as Jamie said, I am the founder and principal of Sapphire Fundraising Specialist, and I work with nonprofits on their fundraising. So that might be strategy, that might be operations, that could be major gifts, capital campaigns, but really it's about how can nonprofits raise more money and also keep the donors that they currently have, especially individual donors. And so that's what I work with them on. And I do that through consulting, through training, through coaching. And, when I think about impact, and I'm curious about what you think too, Jamie, but is so much of fundraising has to do with confidence, and confidence in soliciting is super important. So I really work with my clients on increasing the confidence, of course, having the tools in their toolkit on what to do and strategies when meeting with donors and preparing for those meetings and how to follow up and steward. But a lot of it really comes back to confidence. And the other thing is about that I hope my clients get from our time together is clarity around messaging. Saying we need money is not a good message. It doesn't, I just saw someone else was talking about, I think Austin from Pixelites, he was talking about on the website how, if you were to show your website to someone else and you didn't have the brand or anything there, would it just be a generic website and it wouldn't, it just looks like any other nonprofit. And it's the same thing when it comes to fundraising. It can't just be, we need more money. We need it by, December 31st. You need to make it clear what's the need, what's your why. And so to really get some clarity around that. And that's what I hope my clients get from me.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think confidence, that's something that I try to work on with project coaching clients and when I'm training folks on project management too, because I think, people need to have a little bit of confidence to be able to manage teams well, and to really feel comfortable. But I also think, project management is all about communication, which is kind of that messaging piece. So I think there's some overlaps there.
Yeah.
So I have heard you say that, you focus on helping executive directors, development directors make an actionable and achievable plan for their fundraising campaigns. So can you talk a little bit more about how you approach developing fundraising plans?
Yes. Well, Jamie, I know you know this too, and I think a lot of our audiences as well, is that each nonprofit is just a little bit different. They have different strengths, they have different staffing, more staff in different departments, different budgets, different boards of directors, obviously different missions, different locations. So when it comes to a plan, I really think it's important to think about all of those things, because fundraising can't just be done by the executive director or the director of development or even just the development team. Everyone needs to be clear about how are we going to raise the money for this organization so that we can operate. And that's, again, why we raise the money, is because we need it to operate. So when it comes to putting together a plan, and again, Jamie, you're the real expert on planning, is how do you think about these different elements, the different strengths, the different weaknesses, and how do you make smaller goals in order to achieve results? So for example, let's say a nonprofit has a goal of raising $10 million for the year. Great. But how do you actually do that? So you would start by thinking about the different streams of revenue. So that could be from companies, that could be from foundations, that could be events, it could be from individuals. It could be from other income that the organization brings in, and thinking through each one and bringing down to a smaller goal. So you're at 10 million now, you're at 2 million for individuals. Okay. And then from there, you think about what is the renewed money or the money that you think will come again from the same people that came in last year. How much do you think that will be? And then break it down even further on who those people are and who maybe could even be an increased gift. And then you have usually a difference of new money you need. And then you could think about a strategy around, okay, how do we bring in that new money? So, you take that big goal of $10 million, and then you might go into really specifics of, okay, we're going to go all the way down to, we want to bring in $100,000 in new money from people who are giving under $500. And you have a plan then for that. So instead of just thinking, how do we raise 10 million, you're going down into all these different strategies and then going forward from there. So, you want to make it achievable that, if we're going to get to 10 million, we've got to figure out what we can do to get there. But it's really got to be those one piece at a time, but also a comprehensive annual plan. How do you think
That's about great. Yeah. So I really love that because I think that hits some key points. One of my things that I really feel strongly about when it comes to things like strategic planning is that you have to know how you're going to get there. The plan doesn't really matter. And then from a project management perspective, I think project management is really good at that planning at that operational kind of logistical level. And so you have a goal, how are you going to get there? But I think one of the things that people are often surprised about when it comes to project management is working backwards from a deliverable is how you actually get your project plan. And so, like you said, you've got 10 million as this big picture goal, but if you're going to do 2 million from a certain type of donor in a certain way, working backwards from that to get a plan, I think is what is so important, because otherwise people don't know how to get there. And I also think sometimes when you have that bigger goal, thinking about all of the ways that you're going to get to that 10 million and trying to plan it all and sort of, this is what we're going to do for this whole year, can be really overwhelming for people. But if you break it into those smaller pieces and say, well, how are we going to get this 2 million, or how, and then how are we going to approach this campaign, makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. And the other thing, and it's different for a startup or a relatively new organization, but for organizations that have been around, I think the other thing when it comes to being actionable and achievable is reviewing the past. And I know you are all about, project reviews in that, okay, what worked? What didn't work? What did our donors find interest in? What didn't they find interest in? There have been times where I had an idea and I thought it was brilliant and it was going to be super successful. And guess what? It tanked. And, we all have those, again, not every idea is a great idea, but sometimes you need to test it to see how it works and then take that feedback and do better the next time. So again, if you're at a $10 million organization, chances are you already raised hopefully at least 8 million last year. So how did you do that? And what worked, what didn't? So but thinking about if you're going to grow or you're going to raise more money or whatever it might be, where are the areas that could be growing, and looking back at what was successful in the past and how do we do more of that, and the things that weren't working as well, which is not always so easy to assess and say, this actually isn't a strength for us. And say, maybe we should do less of this, or maybe we need to change it or revise it.
Yeah, those retrospectives are kind of critical project management, kind of 101 sort of basics, but they are so useful. And I do think when we apply that to fundraising projects, you're not just looking at the number. Did we meet the fundraising goal? You're looking at all of those other pieces about how you approached working together, what some of the specifics were around the larger project and whether it was useful and what you can do with that again.
Exactly.
So I also like that your services focus on a broad range of donors, including mid-level donors and legacy giving. So why would you say it's important for organizations to have a more comprehensive and inclusive approach to fundraising?
Yeah, so similar to what we were just talking about, in that, some things may be working and some things maybe not, but you really want to have a comprehensive, inclusive approach, because also there's a lot of changes that can happen to an organization within a year. And usually we talk about fundraising annually, not always, but generally. And so, whether it's a change to the need of the organization, there could be environmental changes. Like, let's say there's a global pandemic and it changes everything in the world, that it's hard to plan for. There could be changes to donor styles. For instance, we are seeing more and more people give online, more and more need to give online. Direct mail is going down. We're seeing, you might have staff changes. So I could go on. So for sustainability purposes, and a stability, you want to have income coming from multiple places. Now, the other thing I will say is that, people ask me, how do I find my next big major donor? And I would say, have you looked in your database? Who's giving a mid-level gift? Who's, consistently giving to you? Or what if, I also hear a lot, all of our major donors are over the age of 70. And I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you that they are not going to be around forever. And either you need to find a way to replace their giving, and you also should talk to them about a legacy gift, because unfortunately, this may be a spoiler alert, but people don't live forever. And so you can't take your money with you. And so legacy giving is a way for someone to give when they're no longer around, but they care about the legacy of that issue and that mission and that organization and that work. So all of these different things help for stability, because the other thing I'll say is that a lot of nonprofits will have at least 80-20 rule when it comes to revenue. 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of their donors. And then when one of their top donors who's giving, a significant amount of money, let's say that donor decides, I'm not going to give anymore. Or let's say a foundation is like, we're changing our scope of focus and we're going to, we're not investing in this area anymore. You're out of luck. And so you need to find other areas to make up that giving. So that's why having that diverse pool helps to stabilize, as there's inevitably going to be changes. How do you think about, knowing that there are unknowns? How do you plan for that? How do you think about planning for that?
So, yeah, I think, like you said, having a more comprehensive plan and thinking about all the pieces. When I talk to folks about project planning, I always talk about being really broadly inclusive when you're thinking about who your stakeholders are. Mm-hmm. And I think this is, kind of what you're talking about, that instead of focusing and putting 80% of your energy into thinking about a couple of donors who may or may not stick with you, or may develop different priorities, thinking about all of the types of people that you might be able to get as donors. And I love the idea of looking kind of at those mid-level folks as people that you can be cultivating to maybe be a major donor later, mm-hmm. making sure that you're cultivating your major donors for that legacy giving. You're almost creating a pipeline, a giving timeline, yeah. Right? That people can use throughout kind of their relationship with the organization.
Definitely.
So from a project management and kind of implementation planning perspective, having a clear and consistent process for fundraising activities can be really helpful. What processes do you recommend organizations use throughout the year?
Great question. Where to begin? I think the first thing that I always say when it comes to fundraising is track everything. You may think you will remember a conversation you have with a donor. I guarantee 1 month from now, you might remember you spoke to them, you might remember some of it, but you won't remember most of the details. Write those notes in your database. First of all, you should have a database, and you should put your notes in your database. And because a year from now, you're definitely not going to remember when you spoke to them, what you spoke to someone about. And also, we know that nonprofits, there is staff turnover. And so help, your successors, whenever that successor may come in, with knowing this information about donors. But beyond just the one-on-one conversations, what emails do you send from a mass perspective? What were the open rates? What were the click rates? What were the conversion rates to donations? Gathering all that information, what social media, all of it. And saying, we did an event. Who did we invite? How did we all of these pieces that seem really granular. Again, you're hoping for sustainability and long-term financial success. And therefore, that means every year you're going to do something. So why not look back on what you did in prior years, see successes, see, less than successes, and build off of that. So track everything would be my number one thing when it comes to project planning. The second thing is that you can't think of fundraising one time and that donors just want to be in touch one time. I joke that no one wants to be thought of as money bags and just, you come to me, you need my annual gift and then, we never are in touch again. Like no one wants to be seen that way. And so it's important that after a donation is made, that's when like the real work comes in with that donors. How do you keep them to coming back to you? How do you give them updates? I was just talking to someone and she said that she was part of a capital campaign. She gave a gift and they did an update on where they were. They weren't done. They hadn't completed the full campaign, but they were the people who had already given, they gave them an update saying, here's what we're doing already with the money you've invested. And she was like, I kind of want to give it even more because I feel some ownership towards it. So when people feel connected, they will give more, and it can't just be one time that you're talking about it and one time you're talking to them. So it's got to be a year-long thing. And the final thing when it comes to consistency is that I think 100% of your staff and 100% of your board of directors needs to honor, respect, and support efforts to raise money. And whatever that might be different, but people need to understand that people, companies, foundations, government, whatever, that give money to this nonprofit, it's a voluntary thing. They don't have to do it. And without that funding, the organization does not exist. So it's important that there is thinking about how do we include the investors to the organization so that we can keep retaining that money and grow.
Great. Yeah, I think, I see so many parallels, which is of course why we're having this conversation between fundraising and, a lot of kind of good project management best practice. And particularly when I'm working with nonprofits and mission-driven organizations, I always say that we have to do our communication planning for a project first. Like as soon as you figure out who the people are, you have to do communication planning. Often it's left till the end. It's like, oh, here's everything we're going to do. Then let's think about how we're going to tell people about it. Nice. I think that communication piece has to come really early. And that's kind of embedded in the three things that you were just talking about, and particularly how are you going to document information? How are you going to keep engaging people? How are you going to give updates? That's often the thing. We ask for help from people, whether it's a project or a fundraising campaign, but then don't tell them what happened. Like I gave you my time, I gave you my money. What was it used for? What are you doing? Yeah. And I sometimes think too, people are afraid of saying, well, we got delayed or whatever. I think you just want to be transparent and kind of honest with people. And so, I feel like when I hear from organizations that I donate to about what they're actually doing, not just another ask, it does make me want to give more. It makes me want to continue that relationship. I can see where my money or my time is going.
Yeah. And I focus primarily with individuals who give money. So not the companies or not the foundations, but, individuals, I don't care how wealthy the person is, what level of supporter they are people and people want to be generous, especially to things they care about. So, when you're thinking about your giving updates, people, hopefully if they gave money, hopefully they feel good about it. And you can go back and remind them and say, remember how you did this thing? Let me tell you how much it means to us and what we're already doing with it. So, and even if it's it doesn't have to be big. Sometimes really small things, we help this one person, or let me tell you this one story of this one change that was made, or something can be really intimate and powerful. So I think that regular updates, and again, it makes people feel more connected. And when you have your stakeholders, like you were saying, Jamie, when all these different stakeholders feel connected to a project and the success and the outcome, they are going to continue to support and advocate and help you whenever you can. Versus if you ask someone for something, whether that's a gift or their time or, something, and then you never follow up with them, I mean, that doesn't feel real good, So you always want to, I had a boss once who told me, you always want to win the race. You want to get back to someone with the information before they ask you, hey, did you ever get that information on something? You want to win the race with your communication and get to someone first, so that they don't have to ask you that question when they've already asked you. So that's the other thing I think about when it comes to all year long is how can you win it's a long-term race we're in with our donors, and you want to make sure that they feel good about giving. I think that's the other big thing is that you don't want them to feel like, oh, my arm was twisted and I gave a gift that I didn't really want to give, because chances are they're not going to give again. Versus they feel good about it and they feel supported by the organization and they continue to hear about great updates. Because again, it's something they probably really care about. That's why they gave in the first place.
Yeah, I think we tend to focus on telling people what we're going to do, both in projects and fundraising, and then don't follow up with what we actually did, which I think is so critical to continuing that relationship. So, Susan, if folks have questions for you, are there ways that they should reach out to you, connect with you?
Yeah. Well, again, Jamie, thank you so much for bringing me on. It's so good to talk to you. And if people want to reach me, they can contact me either on LinkedIn. My name is on the screen, Susan Kahan, Kahan, and they can message me or follow me or connect with me there. They can also email me. I'm Susan at sapphirefundraisingspecialist.com, and I can put that in the comments because I know it's a little long. And my website is also sapphirefundraisingspecialist.com, and I think the link will be there, and people can connect with me that way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for participating in our Impactful Projects and Planning Micro Training Series. Folks can visit yazdaniconsulting.com IPP to view all of the sessions in this series. There's also a link to Susan's website and I think her LinkedIn for the information about this micro training. And you can go to that website and learn more about our upcoming micro training. So thank you.